Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Tigers Tonight. I am your host, John Maddox. I don't know who I am. I've lost all self accountability these days, and I've always wanted to say this tonight. Brian Moss is on assignment.
Yeah,
Brian is
yeah. We put him out.
Yeah, that's right. We've sent him out to. He's going to be our man on the street. No, but and Larry has been rescued from the depths of hell that is the Orlando International Airport to join us again this week from the palatial Marley Manor here in beautiful, scenic, crime-free Hernando, Mississippi. Mr. Marley, how are you, sir?
Well, I am fine, and we had a huge win. So if you're not fine, then probably something wrong with you. You need to get medicated or something.
Yeah, it was quite a scene down there on Saturday in beautiful Tallahassee, Florida. I made the drive down Friday night and then split it up, came back halfway on Saturday, and then on Sunday, I actually spent the night in Mobile. Boy, Jeb said it best. I feel sorry for anyone who isn't us right now. But so I drove down Friday, made that entire drive on Friday, drove through Troy to get there. And then, like I said, I came back a different way, came back through Mobile, pretty much so I could stop at Buc-ee's. That was pretty much the point of that sojourn back home. But no, it was actually an easier drive too, because it's changed a little bit. I came back because it's almost all 4-lane now up to Hattiesburg, and then of course into Jackson is all 4-lane. And last time I made that drive from just outside of Jackson was not.
And so I told you about that. And that is actually, so if you do your Google Maps, it's going to tell you to go through Troy and all that. And that's fine. But for your mental health, going through Mobile and then up to Hattiesburg and picking up 49 to Jackson is the way to go. And I actually made that exact drive a couple of weeks ago when I was in Tallahassee and I went to go see, you guys know this because I did the show from Tallahassee, but I went to go see my daughter in Hattiesburg. And so I did that exact drive. And I'm telling you, the drive down through Troy is, first of all, if you ever have any intense desire to go to Troy, Alabama, don't.
Troy was the best part of that drive from Montgomery to Tallahassee. Did stop at a night, can't remember the name. Had a decent barbecue meal there in Troy, but so it was, it was interesting. I have a lot of thoughts about this game on Saturday. I went back and Duncan, of course, makes his first. You'll see his tail. He's not going to get on camera, but anyway,
we got the tail.
Florida State's got problems. They've got lots of different problems. Sorry, I'm a little reasonably distracted there. They've got issues, Larry. Their biggest issues. Well, first of all, Memphis defense was lights out. Let's start right there. Show some of the stats here for a minute. But Memphis's defense was absolutely lights out. But Mike's got effort issues down there, and as you know, as a former player, that's really tough to overcome. And if the joke has been that Florida State is actually the first team this season to cash out on the under in their win total, because the total I think was 8.5, and they're already at 0-3.
It was 9.5, and they're already
9.5. Yeah, they're already there. So they've already cashed the under on that. But they've got problems down there. That Florida State team is not very good. But I said this to somebody earlier this week. I said this game was very, very reminiscent to me of that 2019 Ole Miss at Memphis game when Mississippi came in and Memphis just beat the hell out of them up front on both sides of the ball. This game, Larry, it felt a lot like that. And Jeb said their OL was bad, and that was supposed to be their strength. They had the most returning starts of any team in the country. But then that kind of goes back into that thing, I talk about a lot in basketball. Just because you got a bunch of kids coming back doesn't mean they're any good. But I was pleasantly surprised at how well our defense and offensive lines held up physically against them.
Well, and I said a couple of weeks ago that I thought that Memphis' defense was the fastest defense I had ever seen a Memphis defense be. I'll stand behind that. They swarm to the ball. They make everything difficult. The FSU receivers struggled to get separation. And when they did get separation, we were right on top of them in general. The screen. So one of the reason they kept going to the screen was because they couldn't get over the top of our defense. They did one time the whole game, couldn't get over the top. So they're going to their under routes and they're going to their screens. And look, their quarterback is not very active, and he doesn't make great reads. What you saw was a combination of a quarterback who was confused and a defense, as you say, that was just playing lights out. And up front, we got pressure on the quarterback with just 4 guys. That's something you and I've talked about over the years, right? Being able to do that. This was a complete team effort. And I thought that our linebackers and our safeties controlled the middle part of the field, which was, I thought, where Florida State really wanted to try to attack, and they were unsuccessful. And I thought that was the key to the game.
Yeah. And they tried, and they had, I think, 4 drops is what I counted.
Yep.
I don't know that he was Arkeelan Hall bad,
No,
but he was
bad.
not great. But he didn't get help. And, but so a lot of that, again, we're talking about some of that goes to that Memphis defense.
Yep.
You held Florida State to technically 70 yards rushing, 238 total yards. But to me, the big stat of the game is this number right here. Time of possession. Memphis was on the field for 13 more minutes, and they had doubled them up at one point, and it kind of came back in. But that was the key to me is, we talked about it last week, was keeping the defense, letting them rest and not have to do so much of the legwork. But the Memphis offense was just, they weren't explosive. But Seth was very efficient, 25 of 38 for 272, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, 66% completion percentage. 18 of the 25 completions went to running backs and tight ends. And in the post game, I asked Anthony Lamphere, how cool is it that, this is an offense where the tight ends are very heavily featured. And he said, that's the main reason I came to Memphis, is I knew I would get my shots. And Seth says, look, we're going to take what's there. And when guys, especially the one big shot to Rock Taylor, Memphis was content to just stay on the field and march down the field. That was, something Coach Silverfield had talked about, that just, we can't hurt ourselves. And I heard that preached in the pregame down in the tunnel. Don't hurt ourselves. Just be us and take care of us, and everything else will take care of itself. And, Larry, this is a situation where Memphis believed they were the better football team. They legitimately said, we are better than Florida State, and we're going to go out here and we're going to show it. And I think when you look through the numbers, they did just that, with the exception of one drive that Florida State had. They had one big play in the third quarter where they hit, I think it was about a 68 yard pass. But other than that, it was just plodding all day. But the drive to me was that next to last one, when Memphis got back-to-back sacks and made it 4th and 24 and 4th and 32 and forced Florida State to punt the football. But shout out, we're talking about getting pressure with 4, but I went back and counted. Of the last 11 plays of that game, Jordan Hankins brought 6 or more 10 times.
Yep. He was, look,
this is a one-score game.
His blitzing was what you would call he did it in spurts, and I think one of the things he wanted to do was give and I couldn't pronounce the kid's last name, the quarterback for
DJU.
Yeah, DJ. We'll just go with DJ. I thought he wanted to give him different looks in different blitz packages. Man, he dialed up some great blitzes. And the other thing I thought he really did was disguising their coverages on the backside really well. Because when you're blitzing, you don't want to show that you're man until the end. And so he brought blitzes from different angles, gave him different looks. When they would line up in a certain package, we would go to a certain blitz, and I really thought their game plan was excellent overall. Obviously, at the end, he was trying to speed him up. He didn't want him sitting back there and being able to just pick apart a zone. And so, I thought he tried to get the ball out of the kid's hands. Being completely honest, when you see a guy who's making poor decisions, you want him to make them faster. It's just that simple.
It was just one of those things where we're sitting up there and we're watching this and we're like, man, this dude is just bringing heat. And, even the announcer said it, even on that last play, Memphis brought 7 on that Hail Mary and almost got to him, but forced him outside, didn't let him get his feet underneath him. And hey, credit to Julian Barnett for doing exactly what you're supposed to do in that situation. Do not try to catch it. Do not try to do anything with it. Just become the biggest volleyball player you can and spike that thing into the ground. There was that whole sequence at the end, but then, for me, what set the tone was the fumble early, the second play from scrimmage and Darius Coffey just absolutely lit their running back up. I'm trying to see. Yeah, it was Roydell Williams just destroyed him. And then Chandler Martin tried to pick the ball up and run with it once, but then figured out he couldn't. And so he just fell on it, which is what you should do. And that really, to me, set the tone for the rest of the day, right? That said, we're going to come in here. We're going to be physical. We're not going to back down. We're going to come after you. And, Memphis did in all 3 phases of the game. They missed that really long field goal. And then about midway through the fourth quarter, buddy, that 4th and 3 call to go for it when you're clinging to a lead. And how about Greg DeRosier? I mean, he made the 2 biggest plays. He caught the touchdown and he also made that 4th and 3. But that was a massive call that took massive guts to make. And, Ryan said he trusted his guys. He said, I've got a guy that started 40 games at quarterback and I've got all these weapons. I wasn't going to really gain much right there by punting. So let's go for it. So he did. And Jeb brings up a great point about Norvell knowing he was in trouble when he went for 2 after that touchdown. I'm never a fan of chasing points. There in the third quarter when they scored, he's going for 2. And again, my mind goes back to that Memphis, Mississippi game in 2019 when on that third play from scrimmage, Hugh Freeze called that trick play that worked. And I think I even texted you and said, they know they're in trouble. That's the only reason the quote Power 4, Power 5 team does stuff like that is when they know they're in a little bit of trouble and they feel like they've got to get into their bag to make the game level. But I was just impressed with the physicality. We talked about it. We had no idea which way this game was going to go. I thought Memphis could offensively play with them, but I was absolutely stunned at how great or how Memphis physically matched up both sides of the football. I was just stunned. I couldn't believe how well Memphis matched up and how they held up. But again, Larry, I think a lot of that is when you have the ball for 36 minutes versus 23 minutes, your defense doesn't really have to hold up.
Yeah, I mean, you look at how they dominated the line of scrimmage on the offensive side. That was really, how many times did we go on 3rd and 2, hand the ball to Brandon Thomas? The first time he gets hit, he's 3 or 4 yards downfield. And, we did that multiple times. Brandon got the first touchdown, right? He ran it twice, didn't make it. And then we threw the pass. But the point was, like, we were pounding the ball right down their throat. And when you can do that, that you're extending drives, you're converting on 3rd downs, and you're keeping their defense on the field. One of the things that I was concerned about in this game, I'm sorry I wasn't on the show last week, but one of the things I would have said is that I would be concerned about the fourth quarter when when their depth would really start to manifest itself, right? And I think I texted you guys or maybe tweeted something out about this exact issue, that if I had a concern, it was then in the fourth quarter when your defense is starting to get tired. It's hot. It's a day game, and that's where their depth starts to take hold. But because we had dominated the time of possession, that never really became a factor. It never got there. And to his credit, this is exactly the way Silverfield likes to play. I mean, it just is. I mean, this is what Ryan likes, is to dominate on the line of scrimmage, control the time of possession, and win in the fourth quarter with strong defense and some opportunistic offense, right? That's what he likes.
Yeah, I mean, but it was just, I was just surprised because I kind of thought like you that as the game went on, because it got hotter as the game went on. It rained about 9:30, 9 o'clock Memphis time. It absolutely poured down, and then by the end of the game, it was just hot and humid. But man, Memphis did not wilt. But again, I think a lot of that is just because they had the ball and just although when they were on offense, that looked like the better call was to let Florida State play offense, because Florida State played themselves out of this game in a lot of ways. They just made too many mistakes on the offensive end. Memphis goes 7 of 17 on third down. I think they're like 2 of 15. They just weren't very good, but a lot of that goes to Jordan Hankins, especially, mixing up coverages, like you said. And then the Memphis offense did what they needed to do. This was not a game where Memphis's offense had to come out and be super flashy and, do all these trick plays and all that. To your point, Larry, it's just, this is how Ryan wants to win. And Memphis fans are going to have to make some adjustments with that, because Tommy West famously said it. He said, one day winning isn't going to be enough. The days of Memphis winning 56-51 are over for the most part, probably.
Yeah.
As we stand today. I just don't think that's who Memphis is. And that's fine, because as I always tell people, at the end of the year, they count the ones on the left and ones on the right, and that's it.
Well, if you look at how he's recruited, the Troy game, which unfortunately I wasn't on last week, but the Troy game is exactly what he wanted. He was up, I think, 31-7 or 38-10 or whatever we were up. And, he just put the clamps on and said, I'm done. I mean, he could have called a number. He could have, probably scored 45 if he wanted, but that's not who Ryan is. They had a late touchdown to make it, I think it was 38-17. I can't remember the final order. I think that's right. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The point was, that is exactly how he likes to do it. He clamps you down, scores on offense, and then in the fourth quarter, he just chokes you out. That's the end of the game. I mean, that's and that's who he is. Like you say, I don't see anytime soon there's not going to be a 2019 SMU game in our future, right? That's not. I mean, he can do that. I think Ramsey could do that if they had to, if they got in a shootout. But I don't see anybody on our schedule capable of, knock on wood, of doing that to us this year.
Yeah, I don't see it offensively either. And Memphis only called one trick play the entire game, and that was they tried to throw it back across, and that should have been a penalty on Florida State, because they just flat out tackled Seth. They just chugged him to the ground. It should have been a penalty. It was there, and just didn't get called. But so just one of those things, man, where yes, Florida State's very bad. I'm not trying to downplay this. Florida State's very bad. That's just not a good team. But by golly, Memphis went into a Power 4 again. Best offensive line in the country, right? Most experienced offensive line in the country, the most feared defensive line in the country. Memphis just whipped them. Memphis just kicked their ass. Like, there's no other way to say it. From a coaching perspective, I think I texted you and Brian, what do we always say when situations like that? There looked to be probably 1.6 million places some of those Florida State players wanted to be other than on that field in Tallahassee, Florida on Saturday. And, you looked around and you saw effort. You saw guys just not giving effort, but you saw Memphis guys just giving back to the Greg DeRosier's plays. Both those plays, it would have been easy for him to run out of bounds or fall down, but these guys are stretching and diving, rock fighting for every yard. And then there were a couple plays that I went back and watched tape of where when Florida State they ran that screen out to the right side where they stacked the receivers, and all the lead receivers got to do, all he has to do is just get in somebody's way, because you were lined up in man, and so you're stacked. So he's just got to get in those two guys' way. He'd move. And so I think it was Davion Ross just went right around him. And, that's effort. And, that's not something Mike's going to tolerate. But I think what you were seeing at Memphis is these kids love playing for Ryan Silverfield, and they have, whatever it is, they are, pardon the pun, all in. They have bought in. And yeah, it was very, very, I left about an hour and a half after the game. We had a great Memphis crowd down there. Had a full section. The band, of course, was there, loud. And by the end of that game, you could hear the Memphis fans, and you weren't hearing much. I'm just all around stunned at the shambles that Florida State program is in. And boy, Doak Campbell is one of those places. It may look beautiful, but whew, that place is an erector set underneath that beautiful outside facade. But a lot of history on that campus. Great host, but that place is old, and they're working. I think it's $270 million, mostly of the luxury suites, but they had the whole section below us blown out. So for those who, yes, you can play in a stadium where they are doing construction. I think I counted 9 stadiums this past weekend where they're doing some sort of construction while they're playing games there. But all in all, just a big win for Memphis. And so, Larry, where do you put this one in terms of, because Mike or Ryan, historic, monumental, those are the words that he used, not anyone else, but that he used. This feels again like those wins over Mississippi, right? Like that they are a defining against a not so great team, but still a really important win for a program like Memphis.
Well, certainly it's not up there with 2015 when we beat Ole Miss here after Ole Miss had just beaten Alabama the week before, right? I don't think it's in that class. But to go to Florida State, I think that's the big trick, is going on the road to a school like Florida State and winning. It's probably top 10. You and I've been around for a while, so we've seen Memphis beat Florida at Florida, right? And beat a really a bad Alabama team here. But we've beaten a lot of teams like that in the past. But yeah, I would definitely put it at top 10. The thing that makes this big for this year is because of the expanded playoff. That's why this is a big win, not because you beat some world-beating team. All right. So because they're unranked and all of the things that we've already talked about, right? But having said that, it puts everything that you want to accomplish in front of you, and you can now move forward with. Look, let's face it. Memphis had seen UNLV win their second game against a Big 12 opponent earlier in the week, right? I think they'd done it Thursday or Friday night. And then Memphis goes out and beats Florida State. Those are big wins, right? Because you now are putting you've got a win that you can sort of notch. And look, at the end of the year, somebody may look at Florida State, well, they went 4 and whatever. Yeah, but you still went to Florida State and won. Like, that's still, it's not nothing. And it's a big win. It is a big win because this year it puts you in a position to go to the playoff, which is something that for the program would in fact be monumental.
Yeah, and to me, it's like I said earlier, it is how Memphis won that game that makes it such a big deal to me. That Memphis out physicaled a Power Four, whatever team, and it wasn't particularly close. Memphis was the by far more disciplined, prepared, physical team. And even if Florida State goes 4-8, you still say you went to Florida State and you won.
Yep.
And it's not going to be the win that I think Memphis hoped it would be, because I think they were kind of hopeful that, Memphis would be sitting there 2-0 and Florida State would be sitting there 2-0, and you'd have two ranked teams kind of going against each other. And it just didn't work out that way. But, you'll take it, burn the boats, take the win, get the hell out of Dodge. As I said in the press box, go down there, get the win, and get the hell out of Tallahassee before they change their mind. And just, don't. And, Ryan has said this before, kind of off the cuff. He said, I'll never apologize for a win. I'm never going to be sorry I won. And you shouldn't be. And your opponent does not matter. All that you need to keep doing is putting ones on the left-hand side of the ledger. And then if you do that, everything else sort of takes care of itself, right? Everything else. But Memphis was the team here, and it didn't look this way, but Memphis had nothing to lose, because if they went down there and lost and were competitive, they could still win the conference, go to the playoff. But now you're starting to see, okay, now Memphis looks like a team that can win this, that can end up in the playoff. So we're going to step aside here for just a minute. And when we come back, we'll have Mike James from the Mid Report, and we'll get set for talking all things Navy. Thanks. You're watching Tigers Tonight. And welcome back into Tigers Tonight. John Maddox, Larry Marley, joined now by friend of the program from the Mid Report, Mike James. Talk all things Navy. Mike, how are you this evening, our friend?
I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to be back with you guys.
Yeah, it's always great to have you and talk all things Navy. So before we get too deep in the weeds, I was just had a chance to kind of look through the two deep. And one of the things that has always struck me about this game is how many players from Memphis, the Memphis area, or Tennessee in general, have been on these rosters in the past. It's just not that way this year. I think I've come across 2 or 3 guys, but I am seeing a lot more Florida, California, Georgia. Is that a change in recruiting strategy, or is that just kind of the old staff is out, the new staff is in, and these guys have better relationships in these places?
It's more about the changeover in staffs. So the biggest recruiter to Tennessee and Memphis in particular was Ashley Ingram, who's now the head coach down at Carson Newman. So he really liked to recruit the Memphis area because it has a pretty robust private school culture. So to be able to get the kind of grades that you need to get to the Naval Academy. But then he found that he could get a lot of that the same from the public schools as well there. So they used to target Memphis pretty hard, and they still target Tennessee, but everyone's in Tennessee now. The secret's out, especially among the service academies, where it's a pretty high level of football played there, and so they all hit it pretty hard.
Oh, sorry. So my brain. So Coach Ken, you're in the second year post Coach Ken. How have you seen the program change in the last 2 years from Coach Ken since he left? Because obviously he was a staple, right, for many years.
Yeah, culturally, I don't think it has very much. Obviously, Brian Newberry puts his own stamp on things, but one of the reasons why Coach Niumatalolo brought him on board in the first place was because they meshed so well culturally to begin with. So I think a lot of that has changed. The most obvious thing is just trying to get a foothold on the offense. For the last couple of years, it's been a struggle. Last year in particular. So schematically, there's some changes, but the continuity, just culture wise, and understanding what it takes to win at Indianapolis is very similar.
So as we look, last year I think one of the big things that Navy struggled with was the quarterback position. It's no secret. But so how has Blake Horvath kind of settled into that role, and what's kind of been the biggest change with him?
I think the biggest change with him is just he is the starter. He knows he's a starter. He's prepared all off season as the starter, and it's made a pretty big difference. Last year, I think the staff wanted him to be the starter, but he just wasn't quite ready at the beginning of the year. And by the time he comes into the North Texas game, plays great, and then gets hurt, and he's lost for the year. So that kind of turnover, obviously when you're rotating through any position, but in particularly quarterback, it's not going to help. But he knew he was going to be the starter. There was maybe a little bit of competition in the spring, but he earned the job in the spring. He's kind of separated himself. And Drew Cronick, the offensive coordinator, one of the things he said that he's most pleased about Blake is just how much he's absorbing the new offense, just taking it all in, and his attention to detail and running the offense. So early returns are good. So it's he's done the job well so far.
So this year, Army joins the conference, but the game is not a conference game at the end of the year. There's also strong rumors that Air Force is going to join the conference. How does Navy, obviously they're excited about Army. How does Navy feel about this whole bringing all of the armed forces into the one conference, playing, and then them all playing each other? How do you think the Naval Academy feels about that?
So there was a time when I think the Naval Academy wouldn't have wanted Army or Air Force in the American. One of the frustrating things about being a service academy is that you always kind of get lumped together with the other two. And so you value the things that make you unique. And Navy, being in the American, was uniquely Navy at the time. But, just the way things are going, people need to understand, especially on the Navy side, that Navy's fortunes are tied to the conference now. So what's good for the conference is what's ultimately good for Navy. And bringing Army in, if you're looking to find brand names that are willing to join the American, it's slim pickings. Army was top of the list, and if you're in that situation now, Air Force is top of the list. And I think there's a certain amount of branding if you want to create the kind of rivalries that people are going to start missing. And as we go forward in the new world of college football, the people who want to hold on to the old things, the classic things, they're gonna look forward to things like the Service Academy games. I think there's some branding opportunities there that I think are good for the conference. So I think as an old sports member, Air Force wouldn't make sense, but if it's like Army and Navy, and they're coming in for football only, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Well, let's kind of get back on the field here. So we've talked about the quarterback position, but looking around the offense, what have been some of the bright spots this year for Nate? Obviously, you guys have gone crazy. You've already thrown it 21 times this season. Who knew that Brian Newberry was going to install the run and shoot? Kidding. But so we know what Navy's going to do, right? But kind of what are the things that, if you're the Memphis defense or an opponent's defense, have been most impressive to you on that offensive side of the ball?
Well, it's funny. I'm not sure we know what Navy's going to do because Drew Cronick's origins are in the wing T, not necessarily the triple option. Now, if you look at what he's done against Temple and against Bucknell, a lot of it was kind of similar to what he ran at Furman, which was a little more option heavy. But I think there's a little bit of question as to what the overall direction of the offense is ultimately going to be. First two games, it's looked a lot like the old offense, and I think that's kind of by design, and I think it's by design a little bit for this game in particular. If you look back at last year's game, Navy came out kind of gangbusters in the first half because of a similar situation, new offense, didn't know what was going on a little bit. come out at halftime, they go down and score, but then after that, they really didn't do much the rest of the game. I think Memphis had a chance to kind of adjust. Okay, this is what we're facing, and then that was kind of the end of that. I think it's kind of a similar situation this year where there's a history there. Memphis has had a lot of success in the last 3 or 4 years, and what they do against the option, they've kind of tended to mix up a lot of the stunts they use to confuse the quarterback really well. A lot of teams will run one stunt and think they've solved the offense, and then you adjust to that and you move on. But Memphis has done a good job of kind of mixing those things up. That's great against the option, but against the wing T, if you do that kind of thing, it kind of spells doom, because you're running all these stunts where guys are kind of abandoning their usual assignments. And in the wing T, where everything's based on misdirection, it can get real hairy real quick. But we haven't really seen much actual wing T from Navy in the first couple of games. So I think the question on the Navy side is, is there something more to show on the offense, or is it a question of, what we've seen is what we get? If there's one thing that I would say has been improved, it's just overall just fundamental. It's just the basics. I mean, just being able to in the option, you're used to kind of handing the ball off and kind of having that first 3 yards guaranteed, but that has not been the case for a while. But you get a little bit of sense of that. They're able to get some big plays and maybe not sustain as many drives as Brian Newberry would like, but do more than they have certainly in the last 2 years. So I think for the most part, the biggest question for Navy is, have we seen the real offense, or is there something more to show?
So let's talk about the other side of the ball, because Newberry was a defensive coordinator, correct, before he became the head coach. So you hold up, let's face it, a not very good Temple team to 35 yards rushing, but they didn't go crazy passing either, only 277 yards. Now, obviously, Bucknell, whatever, you're probably playing pretty vanilla. But you've outrushed both of your opponents. So it's going to be, how is the defense going to slow down, one of the more high-powered offenses in the league, and then B, a really good set of running backs that are going to throw a lot at you this week?
Yeah, that's kind of $1 million question, isn't it? Because if you look at Hennigan's history, I think if you can put pressure on him, I think he can make some mistakes, but putting pressure on him is a lot more easier said than done. I think Navy's a great example of that over the last couple of years. So 2 years ago, they tried to, bring a lot of pressure on him. Memphis answered with kind of like this slow mesh a little bit in the running game that kind of froze the pass rush and created a ton of big plays through the air. Last year, Navy backed off a little bit, and Hennigan only threw for like 210 and with an interception, but Blake Watson runs for 169 yards, has 68 yards receiving, as they're content to hand the ball off and just dump it off a little bit and kind of work their way down the field. Excuse me. So anything Navy has tried so far to try to slow this offense down hasn't worked. And I think you might want to say, okay, so maybe you try some simulated pressure where you show 6 or 7 blitzing, but then back off, maybe try to confuse the offensive line a little bit. But you look down Memphis' offensive line, you see senior, 5th year, redshirt junior. I mean, these are experienced guys. These aren't guys that are going to be confused. And I think just overall from and I listened to you guys talk a little bit about the Florida State game. And I agree a lot with what you said. When you look at typically when a team from this conference has gone to, an ACC team in the past, they might win, but it'd be a shootout. It'd be a 42-40 kind of game. Whatever you can say about Florida State physically, they're still Florida State, and Memphis was right there on that field, matched up with them. And so to be able to, you're not going to bull rush past Memphis. You're not going to confuse them. There are no obvious answers. I'll put it that way. So Yeah, it's just, on paper it's a bad matchup.
So as we're looking here, I'll take Larry's favorite part of the game. We'll take the other 33% of the game, special teams. Am I correct that Navy has not attempted a field goal this year? Because you don't have there aren't any on the stats. That's why I'm asking.
No, I don't believe they have.
Wow, that's kind of be kind of weird 3 games into the season. But so tell us about special teams. You've got Nathan Kirkwood and then Lance Gossett does kickoff duty. So what's kind of, although you haven't seen it, what maybe is the strength of the special teams unit?
So special teams actually was kind of in the spotlight after the opener. Coach Newberry was actually pretty vocal about how disappointed he was, and he's usually a pretty even keeled guy, but he didn't hide the fact that he was disappointed in special teams. Bucknell had a couple of good returns. Navy missed an extra point. That it was disappointing mostly because it was a real strength of the team last year, particularly on kick coverage. Looked a lot better against Temple. The one really big strength of the unit is actually the punter, Riley Reithman. He has the leg that he can kick at 50 yards every time, but against Temple, he actually set up, he put 3 inside the 20, 2 inside the 10, one of which set up the opening score of a safety a couple plays later. So, he's, if field position is a factor in this game, that would be a win for Navy to even make it that way. But if it is, he can be in those kinds of games, he can be a difference maker.
So last question for me is, when we had you on a couple of years ago, right after the pandemic, we talked about how recruiting was really hard during the pandemic and recruiting for you guys because has the roster, do you think the roster is filled out now? Has enough time passed that now we're going to see a fully staffed Navy team, or are they still on the too deep? You still go, ooh, we still got a few holes there.
No, it's that much has passed. And it's funny you mentioned that. The biggest problem wasn't just the recruiting and retention. It's that, so we were talking about Air Force earlier. When the pandemic hit, Air Force took half of their classes and sent them home.
Right.
Disenrolled them from the school and then brought them back a semester later so that they would all graduate late, but it was a de facto red shirt basically. So they sent them home, but then they brought them back. They could practice in the spring and then play an extra semester after, what would have usually been their senior year. Navy didn't do that. That's not happening. You look at Air Force now and they look terrible. They're an option team that has yet to break 200 yards rushing. So I think that pendulum has swung a little bit. There are some depth issues on the team. I think offensive line is, in particular, is a little bit young overall. Like the starters have impressed, but once you get past that, there's some youth back there. But that's typical. You can have that on any team. In terms of the overall, pandemic effects, I think those are in the rearview mirror.
What does Navy have to do to win on Saturday?
I think ball control is a big part of this. So I mentioned earlier that Navy has, they've looked better on offense and they've generated a lot of big plays and like short, like 1-2 minute drives. What you haven't really seen are those marathon 12 play 10-minute clock eaters that just obliterate a quarter. You're going to kind of have to see that a little bit to keep the score low, and if you do that, by the time you get to the fourth quarter, who knows what kind of crazy things happen. But that just level of play in and play out, staying on schedule, getting the yards you need to get, because I think that matchup of Navy's offensive line and Memphis's defensive line is where is where it's going to be a huge factor in this game. And if Navy can keep it together and keep themselves on schedule and just keep picking up those first downs, I think this has a chance to be a better game than certainly Las Vegas thinks. Mostly because the other way, it's just there are no easy answers for the Memphis offense. So Navy's going to have to possess the ball.
Mike, tell everybody how Memphis fans can keep up with you this week.
I am at Navy Bird Dog on Twitter, and I am at themidreport.com.
Awesome. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. We always enjoy our time with you every year, and good luck to the Mids.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks. Mike James from the Mid Report, the Navy rival site. And Larry, I'm going to let you start. I don't think Memphis loses, but I'm a little concerned, but I'll let you start.
Well, anytime you come off a big win, there's an emotional side to that. So they're playing a good Navy team. This is not a bad football team at all. And you're on the road. That's tough. So if I have concerns, it's that Navy, you have a letdown effect after Florida State, similar to what we saw after Mississippi State a couple of years ago, where we let down versus UTSA after having a big lead. So mentally, you have to stay in the game. And then there's a physical factor to it, right? I mean, Memphis has to show up. They can't go through the motions. You're not going to be able to roll the ball out there. I think Vegas has got this a 9.5-point line. I think that's probably in the ballpark, to be honest with you. I think Memphis will be able to run the football. And I think they're going to back off. They're going to do basically what they did last year. They're going to back off. They don't want to get beat over the top. Seth is going to take what he's got in front of him. And here's the thing. Once we get up, it's going to, if you get an early lead, it's really tough, right? So if you can get an early lead, and Jeb's right, they're trying to chase the scoreboard. That's tough. It's really hard for them. They just don't have that explosive. I know they've showed it this year, but I just wonder if they're going to be able to explode on the Tigers defense this week. So if Memphis can get an early lead, this feels like a 28-17, 31-17 game. That's just how this feels.
Yeah, I mean, my concern lies strictly on the Memphis defensive side of the ball, where we have talked about how aggressive we have been and how aggressive Jordan Hankins has been at bringing lots of different pressures and blitzes and all that. The challenge this week is going to be for him to himself dial that back a little bit, because you just can't do that against Navy. And it doesn't matter if they're running the wing T or they're running the straight triple speed option, or you're running a lot of slow mesh or whatever. You can't do that sort of thing against Navy, because that's how you get beat, because you get out of position and you get guys, slanting one way and then they run the little dive. Because there are really two plays you have to stop when you play a team like Navy: the dive and the wheel. Those are the two things you have to stop, because those are the two things that really hurt you. You have to be good at contain, which, if you are an aggressive defense, that's where it can kind of get after you a little bit. I think this is going to be a weather game. If the weather is nice, I think Memphis, can cruise. Memphis has better players, better coaches, better athletes. It's one of those situations. But you're right. This isn't a situation where Memphis just rolls the ball out there and, all right, go get them, fellas, and you run out. You're not playing Charlotte, or you're not playing Rice, you're not playing North Texas. This is completely outside of anything you have seen previously and anything you will see in the future, because Middle Tennessee is not going to run the triple option. They're not going to run the wing T. Nobody else in the conference does it. So it's there's going to be a little adjustment. And I think Jeb is also right there. This isn't Ryan Silverfield's first go around with the Mids. This will be 10, and I think 9 or 10, something like that, since he's been here. So he knows how it works. But I do expect to see Memphis, and it will look more vanilla on defense, but it has to be more vanilla by nature because you just can't play the way you've played against these other offenses and have success. But that being said, I think we will look up at the Navy Marine Corps Stadium at 5:37 p.m. and it will say Memphis 28, Navy 10. That's my. It's in that ballpark. It's in that 28 to 38 to 10 to 21. Like it's going to be somewhere in there. I just think Memphis is better. And to your point, Larry, what you said earlier, Memphis can get out and get ahead, and then Ryan can call the dogs off and just play vanilla football to live to play another day. Because that's everybody jokes about it, but 1-0, that's the mantra. Is you don't have to win. He said this post game, or one of the players did. We don't have to win 12 games today. We have to win this game. And then if you win this game, the next game takes care of itself, and so on and so forth.
But you can't win 12 games today. You can only win the game. Right. You only win this one.
Lose your entire season today. But you can't, you lose your goals today, but you can't achieve all your goals today. So I just have Memphis winning. I forgot what was Brian's input. He had a score
45 something. I can look it up real fast.
45-17. I've got it. Yeah. 45-17. I don't know that it gets that high scoring, but crazier things have happened. So before we get out of here, I did want to address an elephant in the room, and that is, of course, the Pac, whatever they are now.
Mm-hmm.
Last week when we talked, I think they had just added the Mountain West schools, and a lot of people said, well, that's where they're going to end. Well, there have been numerous reports that Memphis and Tulane are next in terms of who the Pac-12 is going after. I'm admittedly torn about this. For me, the sole decision-making factor in this is money. That's it. Because, and people disagree with me with this, but I look at it through this lens. Are people in Memphis going to be excited about going to Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium on a Thursday night in October to play Fresno State versus a Thursday night in October to play Rice? Is there going to be any difference? Because you can I'm taking the top out of it, right? I'm taking Oregon State and Washington State and Boise out of it. When you get into the meat and potatoes of the league, are you going to get more fans? Because that's more eyeballs on TV watching Memphis Fresno State than you would Memphis Rice. TV, probably, because you have two better football names. So to me, it comes down to, who's going to be in the mix for the media deal, which is up in 26. Jeb, he always says we can be packed in less than an hour. And the other day he said, hell, we'll just leave our stuff here and buy all new stuff because we'll have more money. But to me, seriously, Larry, that's what it comes down to is who's going to get in this media mix. The estimates on the new Pac-12 media deal are going to be, I've seen everywhere from 11 to 16, 17. I feel like 15 is probably where it's at. So who gets that media deal plays into this. If ESPN is in the mix, well, they're already paying 10, so why would they pay 12 or 13? But I do like the way Jeff Calkins kind of brought me back around a little bit today, because he said if you're sitting on a lifeboat and it's sinking, or you're on a boat and it's sinking, and you want the big shiny lifeboat to come pick you up. I'll just talk about what I know, which is cruising. So on cruises, you have two different kinds of lifeboats. You have the hard shell that look like actual boats, and then you have the life rafts. So if your ship is sinking and you want that big boat, but your ship is sinking, are you going to get on that Zodiac boat to get the hell off the boat that's sinking? Well, absolutely you are, because you can't wait around to depend on, that big shiny boat coming. But Jeb, that's what I was just saying. I don't, yes, Oregon State versus Charlotte, there's no comparison. Wazoo versus FAU, Boise versus Tulsa, there's no comparison. But that's taking the top out. Like, I'm talking about the bottom. But to me, it comes out to, I think that if the Pac-12 does call, I'm of the mindset that if it is, 20% more than you make today, don't you have to go at this point? Because haven't you, Tim Pernetti on campus today, haven't you kind of ended this relationship anyway? How do you save face at this point when you turn the Pac-12 down?
Well, I think two things. It is financial. This has always been money. That's why everybody's moved around. But number two, I think you can't look at what you've got right now because you're not going to keep that.
Right.
Because the Pac-12 is going to take somebody, whether they take you and Tulane or whether they take Tulane. You're not going to have, and you're going to replace. We've already shown the conference, is not going to replace them with quality, right? So we know where this is headed, and I think Jeff's exactly right. Is that you take whatever the best deal you can get, understanding. Don't think about what you've got right now because that's not going to stay. You're not going to get that. You're going to be CUSA very soon. So you're not getting $10 million on the next deal. So if you can get 12, 15 guaranteed, you take that right now because absolutely you're not going to be getting 10 million down the road. And that's just a fact. And so if you can get even 11, 12, or 13 from the Pac-12, or whatever they're going to be called, you take that right now because you're not going to get that down the road. And that's just where you have to be.
Sorry.
And yeah, that's pretty funny. And look, let's say it for what it is. The conference, it did what we needed it to do. And our football program is immeasurably better than it was the day we walked into the AAC. And part of that is because of the financial and the competitive nature that the AAC allowed Memphis. We played games against ranked opponents. SMU came to town and we actually were on game day, right? These are things that that the conference gave us, but those days are over and it's time to move on. And, the AAC can want Memphis to stay all they want, but at some point in the future, and I don't know if it's this new pack, whatever, or if it's the domino effect through one of the other conferences, but at some point we are going to move because while some pundits say there's no name there, there's enough of a name that the TV people are going to want content. And Memphis has enough cachet. It may not be a big name, but it's got enough cachet that you can, as Jeb pointed out, you could put Memphis on a Thursday night game against Colorado State. And I think there would be some people that go, okay, that's a game I'll sit down and watch.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that, the other thing is that you have to look at is, frankly, if we're being real, the Memphis ACC Big 12 dalliance that's been going on is always going to be there, right? Like that is always going to be out there. This chance may not be out there again to make, while it will appear to be on the field, a somewhat lateral move. But being real, you are trading, and I promise, okay, yeah, I am picking on 6-7 BC now, but you are trading Charlotte for Colorado State. And I don't know much about the Rams, but I'm going to pick on them as the bottom of whatever this new pack, whatever it is. You are trading Charlotte for Colorado State, which is a pretty good trade. You are trading Rice for Fresno State, which is a pretty good trade. And again, that's no disrespect to Rice, who I think might end up being one of the other teams to come simply because of academics. But maybe not. But so you're looking at you have to look at this from a bottom up perspective. And what are you getting rid of and what are you getting? And is the trade-off a little better? Yes. But then I had somebody bring up a great point to me today. And this to me, the way we are thinking now is a total mindset shift. When was Memphis basketball their most successful? When they were the biggest fish in the smallest pond possible. And so the school of thought is, are you significantly, do you have a significantly better chance of making the college football playoff every year by battling in a slightly stronger conference versus blowing the doors off of a much lesser conference? I don't think you can take that chance, because if you're Memphis in CUSA 3.0 and you slip up on a Wednesday night against Charlotte and lose, you're not going into the playoff. If you go into Corvallis on a Wednesday night or on a Thursday night in November and you get your doors blown off, you can still come back and win the championship game and make the playoff. There's not a, you would still be the highest rated group of 5 champion, because what's not going to happen is the Pac-12 is not getting an automatic bid. There's no going back. We're going to go down to 2 automatic bids and everybody else will be at large. But that's the mindset that I think has shifted. Is before we would have said, well, what does basketball want to do? Well, if we're being real, this doesn't hurt basketball.
No, absolutely not.
I mean, again, I haven't delved into this strength of schedule, but I got to think that Memphis playing, again, I'm just going to pick at them, Colorado State is an upgrade from Memphis playing ECU in basketball on a Wednesday in January. Like, I got to think that's an upgrade. So I do think I've come around to the notion, but I just think people need to kind of pump the brakes a little bit about what this will mean long term. This is another Big East. This is a Band-Aid. If I'm just going to call it what it is. This is another way to tide over to see how things are going to shake out. Because what's going to shake out, and I've said this from day one, is you're going to have 20 to 32 teams that are going to completely break away. And they're going to play the majority of games against themselves all year. And then you're going to have everybody else. And you just want to be at that second level instead of that third level. Right. So you just want, because you're not at this point in the game, you are not going to be on that top level. So you want to be in that middle level. And if you stay, to your point, Larry, if you stay, you're going to be playing Sam Houston State and Kennesaw State. And, your big game is going to be UAB. And again, I'm not disparaging these other schools. I don't want people to take it that way, but just the truth of the matter is Memphis has positioned themselves to be better than that. Memphis has positioned themselves to be closer to Mississippi State, Oregon State, Washington State than they have Arkansas State, Troy, UAB, Kennesaw State. Like, Memphis has put themselves and has finally made the investment to do that, to where, they are pumping money, a $25 million NIL fund from FedEx, $5 million a year over the next 5 years. Memphis is investing. They're spending $260 million in Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium. And I said this the other day, and I can't put it any more blunt. They're not spending $260 million to play Rice. Like that that's not the point of this. That's not the point of, they're not renovating the stadium to renovate the stadium. That's not the reason they're doing this. The reason is to get into a better position than they are. And I do think I have come around that as long as the money is more, you got to go. I mean, you don't really have a choice at this point, because you don't know when the next shakeout's going to happen. And if you pass it over this time, are they going to be as reticent to knock at your door in 2 years when they need 2 more members? So, all right. Well, so I did want to address it because I think they are meeting this week, probably tomorrow and maybe Thursday. And then I've been told that whatever is going to happen very, very quickly. So if Memphis is extended an opportunity, and let me clear the air here. If Memphis gets an invitation, it's a done deal, because the Pac-12 is not going to invite someone that's not going to accept, just like coaches have, he has not been offered the job. Well, no, the only guy that's ever been offered the job in the history of coaching is the guy that took it, with a couple notable exceptions. But so anyway, so I'd expect
they always take the job. They may leave and go back to their old school, after 2 or 3 days, but they always take the job.
Yeah, and so this would not be for 25. This would be for the 2026 season, right? Think July 1st, 2026. Also, one more quick thing before I run. Hunter Yurchek is the AD at Arkansas, and he was at the Touchdown Club last night, and he was, for some reason, totally surprised that Memphis is renovating their stadium, and he would be open to switching the game. I said from the day it was signed, Arkansas is never playing a football game in Memphis ever again. That's just not happening. And if Memphis lets this one go, which I don't know that Dr. Scott's the kind to just do some of the things that past administrations have done and let things go. I'm cautiously optimistic with the little bit of time I've spent around Dr. Scott. He is what early returns for me are. He is what Memphis has lacked in the athletic director's chair. He is charismatic. He is dynamic. He does not shy away from things. And while I still am not sure that, we needed to go totally outside the family to fill the role at this time, but and Joey is dead on. You invite the Missouri thing again when you start letting Yurachek move pieces around. And that's what I think Memphis is in a little different. Like, what was it when Brad Martin, well, they were hiring Justin Fuente. What did Brad Martin tell Jimmy Sexton? You're not negotiating with R.C. Johnson anymore.
Right.
This is, I think, kind of a situation. So,
but
anyway,
they're going to have to pay their way out of it. This is not going to be, and they can do that. But yeah,
and to me, it shouldn't be. Well, we'll pay you $1 million and let's play in Little Rock. No, you're either coming to Memphis and playing the game as agreed, or you're going to pay me $2.5 million and get the hell out of my schedule. Like that's and you're not getting basketball.
We'll schedule somebody else because we've already shown like we can schedule somebody and people will show up and the ESPN will be there to broadcast it and whatever. I mean, I would just as soon. I'll be honest. I would just as soon bring Colorado State in as I would Arkansas. I mean, don't get me wrong. Arkansas is a name, but I personally, do I think Tiger fans are just jonesing to see Arkansas?
No,
John?
But you have a lot of Arkansas fans here, and
I understand that. But
I like the regional rivalries. I like them a lot because they make the work day a little more because, I work at home. So, all of my multiple personalities follow Memphis, but, those of us who have offices, it's like, well, you're having an Arkansas guy and a Mississippi. Yeah. Mississippi suddenly has a scheduled opening.
They do actually.
Wake Forest said, no, sir, not anymore. You got Arkansas fans in Mississippi State and Mississippi and Tennessee. And that does bring some of that, but, Colorado State's probably going to be a league game. So, who knows? Anyway, it's going to be, it's just one of those things. Memphis has to jump on the lifeboat, and the Arkansas thing is what the Arkansas thing is. I don't think current administration would have ever signed that deal, frankly, to begin with, because they knew what was going to happen. And this is the thing, the first chance that Arkansas sees that they can get out of this, because frankly, they're going to be hiring a new football coach next year, and they're going to, they're in perpetual rebuild in Fayetteville. But they're not going to want to take a chance on hurting a coach who's coming in his first year to come in here and get beat by Memphis. That's not how you build success in SEC country. But anyway, that's another story for another time. Brian will actually be at whatever game, Navy on Saturday.
The Navy game.
And then we will be back. Hopefully the team will all be back together Wednesday or Tuesday.
I don't know if you're going to be there, but I will be at the middle game.
No, so I'm not. Sam and our team will be in the press box covering the game.
Right.
I'll be here next Tuesday, but then we're off the next week just to kind of get everybody set up, because then Memphis is off. And then Sam and Brian are going to do the podcast the next Tuesday, because Larry and I will be in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico together. So, we'll be on a ship. Let's hope we're not in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico at that point. Let's hope we are still within the friendly confines of the Carnival Breeze. But, so that gets you set up. Brian will have the
ship will be in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico,
and we will be in the middle of the ship. Let's be clear there. And then, so Brian will have the stuff this week, and I'll have keys to the game, and we will have you covered for Navy. So for the best co-host in all the land, thanks, Jeb. Enjoy your trip. Eat some Jimmy's for me while you're up in beautiful Annapolis. For the best co-host in all the land, Larry Marley, and the on assignment, Brian Moss. This is John Maddox signing off. And we will see everybody next week.